Stop. Before you ask God for one more sign, hear this. The emergency may not be that your answer is late. The emergency may be that you have lived with confusion for so long that you started calling confusion normal. Chosen one. That matters. Sometimes, the thing you have been waiting for does not arrive looking like a miracle. It may arrive as a conversation you almost ignore. It may arrive as an idea you nearly dismiss. It may arrive as a decision you keep postponing because part of you is afraid to be wrong. And while you keep asking for a louder sign, the quiet opening may already be standing in front of you. I am not here to manufacture a prophecy. I will not tell you that God guaranteed one exact event on one exact date. What I will show you is more useful than that. I will show you why someone can pray for movement, receive an opening, and still fail to recognize that opening for what it is. Think about your own pattern. One day you feel clear. You know what needs to change. Then a few hours pass, the noise returns, and suddenly the decision that felt obvious starts feeling dangerous again. That shift can be confusing. You may call it weakness. You may call it lack of faith. You may even wonder if God changed the plan overnight. But there is another possibility, and this is the first thing I need you to see. There is a difference between not receiving direction and not holding clarity long enough to act on it. Those two experiences can feel almost identical from the inside, but they lead to very different solutions. If no direction exists, you may need patience. If direction appears but disappears under fear, distraction, and overthinking, then waiting longer may not solve the real problem. I call this the recognition gap. It is the distance between seeing something important and recognizing it clearly enough to respond. That gap can be tiny. It can also grow so wide that a person spends years standing near the same door, asking why nothing ever opens. And this is where the message becomes personal. Maybe you have not lacked desire. Maybe you have tried harder than people know. You prayed, learned, planned, and promised yourself this time would be different. Yet, when the moment came to move, something inside you became uncertain again. That does not automatically mean you were never meant to move. It may mean your clarity was never protected long enough to become action. And if that is true, then another sign is not always the answer. Sometimes, the first task is to understand what keeps breaking the connection between recognition and response. Here is one small thing you can use today. When a meaningful insight appears, do not immediately chase another confirmation. Write the insight in one sentence. Write one reason it matters. Then choose one small action that can test it without gambling your entire life on a feeling. This matters because clarity becomes stronger when it meets reality. It weakens when it only circles inside your head. Practice this small move, and it becomes easier to separate genuine direction from emotional noise. If this speaks to you, write, I choose clarity. Not for an algorithm, not to prove faith. Write it, because identity changes when you stop treating confusion as your permanent condition. Now stay with me. Because the recognition gap does not begin when an opportunity appears. It usually begins much earlier, inside a pattern that quietly trains you to hesitate, doubt, and ask for one more sign. You know the feeling of being almost there. You can sense movement, but something keeps pulling you back. You begin the plan. You feel momentum. Then one doubt enters, and the energy collapses. Chosen one. When that pattern repeats enough times, it can start feeling like your life is cursed. But look closer. You are not always failing at the beginning. Often you get close. You make progress. Then hesitation appears where action would make the change real. That pattern has a name. I call it the delay loop. Clarity appears. Fear follows. Overthinking begins. Action slows down. The moment passes. Then self-blame arrives, and you decide you need even more certainty before you try again. Notice what happens next. The next opportunity requires more proof than the last one. The next decision feels heavier. You tell yourself you are being careful, but part of you is actually trying to eliminate all uncertainty before moving. Life rarely gives that kind of guarantee. This is why being almost there can become a pattern, not because you are lazy, not because you are unworthy, and not because every delay is proof that God has closed the door. Sometimes the loop keeps itself alive because each missed action teaches your mind that hesitation is safer than movement. Think about the small examples. You know you should send the message, but you wait. You see an opportunity, but instead of testing it, you research until the energy disappears. Then you call the silence that follows a sign. That is where the trap becomes dangerous. A missed action can create a false story about reality. You hesitate, nothing changes, and then the lack of change becomes evidence that nothing was meant to happen. But the evidence may be incomplete because the action was never tested. This does not mean you should act on every impulse. Wisdom still matters. Facts still matter. Discernment still matters. You need a way to tell whether you are waiting because the path is unclear, or waiting because fear has learned to disguise itself as patience. Try this simple test. When a decision matters, write down the clearest version of what you currently know. Then ask what one low-risk action could produce new information within 24 hours. Send the email. Make the call. Take one measurable step. You are not forcing an outcome. You are interrupting the loop. Because action can reveal information that endless thinking cannot. One small test may show you that the door is closed, and that is useful. It may also show you that the door was never locked. There is another reason this matters. Every time you move from clarity into action, you build evidence that you can trust yourself to respond. The goal is not reckless confidence. The goal is a cleaner relationship with uncertainty. And now, we reach the next question. Why do intelligent, spiritual, self-aware people keep needing another sign, even after they already have enough information to take one responsible step? The answer is not just about faith. There is a pattern beneath the need for confirmation. It can make anxiety feel like discernment, and hesitation feel like wisdom. Later, we will connect this to something researchers discovered about how the brain coordinates information. But first, you need to see how the confirmation trap works. Now we need to go deeper. The next trap is subtle. It can look spiritual. It can sound wise. Yet if you miss it, you can spend years asking for confirmation when the real issue is that you no longer trust your own clarity. Chosen one, this is the confirmation trap. You receive an insight. It feels strong. Then discomfort rises, so you search for another sign. That sign brings relief for a moment, but the relief fades, and soon you need another message to feel certain again. At first, it feels safe. But when certainty becomes a requirement for every meaningful step, confirmation can quietly turn into avoidance. Sometimes, more signs create dependence on the next sign. Think about a relationship that clearly needs a boundary. You feel it. Then you watch 3 videos, read comments, ask friends, and pray again. By the end, you have more information than before, but less confidence in what you already knew. Or maybe it happens with work. You know one direction deserves a real test, yet instead of testing it, you keep searching for the perfect signal. Another article, another prediction, another voice telling you what to do. The problem is not prayer. The problem is not reflection. The problem begins when you use those things to postpone contact with reality. You do not always need more information. Sometimes you need more capacity to remain steady inside the information you already have. And this is where the title changes meaning. Maybe God is not hiding one dramatic secret until the perfect hour. Maybe the more useful secret is that you have been watching the horizon while ignoring the instrument through which you interpret the horizon. That instrument matters. Your attention matters. Your emotional state matters. Your ability to hold one clear thought without drowning it in 20 fearful alternatives matters. Spiritual meaning and cognitive condition are different, but both can influence your response. I am not telling you every spiritual experience is only the brain. I am saying something simpler. Whatever meaning you assign to an experience, you still receive it, evaluate it, remember it, and act through a human mind. If that mind is exhausted, scattered, anxious, or trained to seek constant reassurance, then even a meaningful insight can become difficult to hold. That is why the condition of the receiver matters. Here is a simple practice. When you feel compelled to seek one more sign, ask yourself one question. Am I looking for new information, or am I looking for emotional relief? If you truly need new facts, go get them. If you are only trying to remove all discomfort, recognize what is happening. Uncertainty is not always a warning. Sometimes it is simply the feeling of standing at the edge of a real decision. Most people never make this distinction. And now another door opens. If the receiver matters, we have to ask, what modern life has been doing to that receiver every day? Stress, fragmented attention, constant notifications, poor sleep, endless switching, and mental overload do not stay outside your decisions. They enter the room with you. Later, I will show you why neuroscience gives us a fascinating way to think about coordination inside the brain, not as proof of prophecy, not as proof that every feeling is divine, but as a clue to why clarity can feel strong one moment and scattered the next. For now, remember this. The secret may not be what God is refusing to tell you. The secret may be what you were never taught to notice about the receiver. There is something else you need to notice. You may remember a version of yourself that felt sharper than this. You could focus longer. You could follow one thought without checking 5 other things. You could become curious and disappear into that curiosity for hours. Then life changed. Responsibilities multiplied. Notifications followed you everywhere. Sleep became lighter. Stress became normal. Your attention learned to jump before one thought was finished, and over time that constant switching started to feel ordinary. This is what I call the normalized fog. The most dangerous part of fog is not that you feel foggy. It is that you eventually forget what clear thinking once felt like. You may start believing this is simply who you are now. You tell yourself you are getting older. You say you have always been distracted. You assume your mind has lost something that cannot return. But modern patterns of attention can train fragmentation. That does not mean society stole your genius in some secret plan. It means repeated interruption changes what your mind gets used to doing all day. Think about a normal morning. You wake up and reach for the phone. 1 message becomes 3. 3 messages become news, comments, videos, and alerts. Before your feet touch the floor, your attention has already been pulled in 6 directions. Then you carry that state into prayer, work, relationships, and decisions. You ask for clarity while your mind has spent hours practicing interruption. That tension matters. The receiver does not live outside your habits. Your attention is shaped by what you repeat. Your nervous system is shaped by what you repeatedly demand from it. And if you demand constant switching, stillness can eventually feel uncomfortable. This does not mean you need to escape modern life. It means you need to stop calling fragmentation normal. You can begin by noticing when your attention breaks, and by creating small periods where one task is allowed to remain one task. Imagine what that could change. You wake up and know the first priority. You read 1 message without opening 10 tabs. You make 1 decision without rehearsing every possible future. You say no without spending the next hour arguing with yourself. That is not a fantasy of becoming superhuman. It is a picture of lower noise, and lower noise changes what you can notice. Maybe you do not need to fix your whole life tonight. Maybe you only need to remember that clarity is a condition you can support. You can protect sleep. You can reduce interruption. You can finish one thought before feeding the next one. If this is the season you are entering, write clarity over confusion. Let those words mark a decision, not a perfect transformation, just a refusal to keep treating mental fog as your permanent identity. And now the next question becomes unavoidable. If you can recognize the fog, and if you can reduce some of the noise, why do so many people still understand exactly what is wrong and remain unable to move? That is where the threshold appears. Because knowing is not the same as integrating. Seeing the pattern is not the same as changing it. And the last thing standing between insight and movement may be the part nobody taught you to train. You have learned, you have prayed, you have reflected, you have watched messages that gave you a moment of certainty, yet a difficult truth remains. Knowing what is wrong does not automatically create movement. This is where many people get trapped. They become addicted to the feeling of insight. A new idea gives relief. A powerful message creates an emotional high. For one evening, everything seems connected. Then morning comes. The insight is still true, but behavior returns to the old pattern. Nothing has been integrated. And because the feeling is gone, you search for another message that can make you feel clear again. I call this the insight-action divide. It is the distance between understanding something and organizing your behavior around what you understand. This matters because revelation can become another form of consumption. You collect truths, you save videos, you write pages of notes. You know what you should do, but knowledge keeps growing while action stays almost unchanged. That does not mean the insights were useless. It means insight is only one part of transformation. The other part is integration. Here is a rule that can expose the difference. One insight, one movement. If an idea truly matters, connect it to one small behavior within 24 hours. If the insight is about boundaries, send one clear message. If it is about work, finish one measurable task. If it is about health, make one practical change that exists outside your imagination. The action does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be real. That is how insight begins to become evidence. Because a small, completed behavior teaches your mind something that another hour of inspiration cannot teach. It says, I can move while uncertainty is still present. I can test what I believe. I can create evidence instead of waiting for a perfect feeling. This is the threshold. You may not need another revelation. You may need a stronger bridge between recognition and response. And now, we arrive at the missing piece I promised you earlier. Remember when I asked whether the receiver itself could be supported? Remember when I told you we would return to the research behind how the brain coordinates information? We are there now. Because if modern life can train fragmentation, then a reasonable question follows. Can the brain also be supported toward better coordination? That question matters more than another prediction. It moves us from mystery into mechanism. It asks what can be done with the condition from which you think, decide, and act. In the next part, I am going to show you the physical side of the receiver. I will explain the research that inspired one specific approach, what that approach claims to support, and where the limits of those claims need to stay. No prophecy is required. No magical certainty is required. You only need to understand the mechanism well enough to decide whether it makes sense for you. Because the goal was never to collect endless signs. The goal is to become more capable of recognizing what matters, holding that clarity, and turning it into a wise next step. Now we can close the loop. The receiver has a physical side. Your attention, memory, emotional regulation, and decision-making depend on a living brain that is constantly coordinating information. So, the framework is simple. Recognize, stabilize, test, act. You recognize what matters. You stabilize the thought long enough to evaluate it. You test it against reality. Then you act without demanding perfect certainty. One famous chapter in neuroscience came from the split brain work associated with Roger Sperry, who received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1981. That research did not prove a commercial audio product. It did not prove prophecy. It showed important differences in how the hemispheres can process information, while also revealing why coordination across the brain matters. The creators of one program cite that body of research as part of the inspiration behind their approach. The program is called the Genius Switch. The Genius Switch is presented as an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. You use headphones, close your eyes, relax, and listen once per day. Its creators call the approach neural sync technology and position it around whole brain coordination. That wording matters. The program is designed and marketed to support a state. It should not be treated as proof that every user will experience the same result. The product materials share customer stories. Lisa, a nurse from San Diego, reports feeling more connected and in control of her life. Matthew, a Shopify owner from Houston, reports stronger focus and clearer thinking. Those are reported experiences, not guarantees. Your experience can be different. The question is whether the mechanism, routine, and financial risk make sense for you. One reason the program may appeal to some people is simplicity. It does not require a mantra or a complicated ritual. The core routine is passive listening for about 8 minutes a day. The creators also position it differently from generic soundtracks online. Their claim is that the sequence uses their own synchronization approach rather than asking you to depend on a long meditation practice. This is where identity matters. The Genius Switch is not another prediction. It is one possible tool for the person who wants to support the condition from which decisions are made. The current offer materials list the program at $39 with lifetime digital access. They also describe a 100% money-back guarantee under the terms shown on the official page. 4 bonuses are listed as well: a guided visualization, a smart grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and a 5 habits infographic. I would not buy it because a video told you God demanded it. I would not buy it because you are afraid of missing a miracle. Those are bad reasons. If the mechanism makes sense to you, and if an 8-minute daily routine feels realistic, review the details yourself through the official link in the description or pinned comment. Pricing and offer details can change, so check the current page before making a decision. Whatever you choose, keep the principle. Do not outsource your discernment to a product. Use tools to support clarity, then test your decisions in reality. This message was never leading you toward dependency. It was leading you toward agency. Next, we return to what life can look like when you stop chasing signs and start building a clearer way to recognize what matters. Whatever you decide about the tool, do not lose the principle. The real goal is not to become dependent on another product, another message, or another prediction. The goal is to become clearer about what deserves your attention and more willing to respond when the evidence is strong enough. Imagine how that changes an ordinary morning. You wake up and know the first priority. You do not spend 40 minutes feeding every possible future. You choose one useful action, finish it, and let completion create the next piece of information. At work, clarity changes the way opportunity feels. You stop chasing every shiny possibility. You compare what is real, what fits your values, and what can actually move your life forward. Then you give the best option enough attention to reveal whether it deserves more. In relationships, the difference can be even more powerful. You stop reading 17 hidden meanings into one message. You ask a clear question. You notice the answer. You separate what the other person actually did from what anxiety is predicting they might do. That is not cold thinking. It is discernment. You still feel, You still pray, you still listen inwardly, but you stop asking fear to disguise itself as intuition, and you stop asking hope to disguise itself as evidence. The same principle applies to your calling. You may never receive complete certainty before the next responsible step. Most meaningful decisions contain some unknowns, and waiting until every unknown disappears can become another way to remain exactly where you are. So, you test, you learn, you adjust, you move again. One clear step does not need to reveal the whole staircase, because its job is only to give you information for the step after it. This is what life can begin to feel like when you stop chasing signs. There is less drama around every decision. There is more space between a feeling and a reaction. You can notice an opportunity without immediately worshipping it or fearing it. And if you are considering the genius switch, keep that same standard. It is presented as an 8-minute daily listening routine. Review the mechanism, the current offer, and the guarantee for yourself. Use the official link in the description or pinned comment if you want to examine it. You do not need to force a decision. A useful tool should support agency, not replace it. If you try it, let your own experience and the terms on the page guide what happens next. Now bring the focus back to you. What would change if you stopped asking for perfect certainty? What conversation would become simpler? What task would finally get finished? What decision could be tested instead of endlessly imagined? Right, I stop chasing certainty. Let that sentence mean something practical. It means you will still use wisdom, but you will no longer demand that life remove every trace of discomfort before you take one responsible step. Chosen one. This is where the title begins to make sense in a different way. The event you have been waiting for may not arrive with thunder. It may arrive quietly enough that only a clearer version of you recognizes its importance. That is why we are not ending with the product. We are ending with the person who must live after the video ends. Because the most valuable thing you can take from this message is not another promise about tomorrow. It is a new relationship with today. You notice more, you test more wisely, you act with less noise. And when something meaningful appears, you are no longer waiting for fear to give you permission to recognize it. Now return to the question that brought you here. What is going to happen? Maybe the answer is not one dramatic event that can be named for every person watching. Something important may arrive much more quietly than your imagination expects. It could be an invitation, a boundary you finally need to set, an idea that keeps returning, a conversation that changes what you understand. It could be an ending you have resisted. It could be a beginning that looks too small to matter. It could be a person who offers useful information, or a moment when you finally see an old pattern without making excuses for it. None of those things need fireworks. They need recognition. And recognition becomes more reliable when you are not drowning every signal in noise. You do not need to become psychic. You do not need to predict the next 6 months. You need enough clarity to distinguish possibility from fantasy, enough patience to test what appears, and enough courage to respond when reality supports the next step. Think about a door in front of you. Do not imagine what is behind it yet. Look at your own hand. The question is not whether you can see the entire room before opening the door. The question is whether you can hold the key without dropping it every time fear speaks. That key is not magical certainty. It is attention, discernment, and the willingness to take one wise step without knowing every step that follows. Now imagine placing one burden on the floor. The burden is the need to know everything before you begin. Feel how heavy it has been. Notice how many decisions became impossible because you demanded an answer that life was never required to give you. You can release that demand. You can still be careful. You can still verify facts. You can still pray and reflect. But you no longer confuse wisdom with paralysis. This is the threshold. On one side is the version of you that keeps collecting signs because action feels dangerous. On the other side is the version that recognizes what matters, tests it responsibly, and learns from what happens next. Stay here for one moment. Let the noise settle. You do not have to solve your whole future tonight. You only need to stop treating uncertainty as proof that the path is wrong. Sometimes uncertainty simply means the next step is real enough to carry consequences. Before we finish, I want to speak to the version of you that is done confusing waiting with paralysis. The version that has survived enough to know that another emotional high is not what you need. You need a clearer way to meet what comes next. You need to remember that opportunity can be quiet, timing can be imperfect, and courage often appears after movement begins. So keep one sentence with you. The moment does not need to look miraculous to matter. Sometimes the most important door in your life looks ordinary until you finally choose to see it clearly. And now there is only one question left to answer. What must be awake in you when that door appears? This is the question we opened with. What must be awake in you when opportunity comes? Now, you have the answer. Your attention must be awake, your discernment must be awake, your courage must be awake, and your willingness to act without complete certainty must be strong enough to survive the first wave of fear. The secret was never the date. The secret was the condition from which you meet the date when it finally arrives. So take a moment of gratitude. Be grateful that a missed opportunity does not have to become your identity. Be grateful that you can learn from the pattern without becoming trapped inside it. Now release what no longer serves you. Release the need for endless confirmation. Release the belief that confusion is who you are. Release the story that every delay means rejection, punishment, or proof that nothing good can change. You do not need to carry that story forward. You can choose a cleaner one. You can learn to recognize what matters and move when the next responsible step becomes clear. So hear these words slowly. I am awake. I am present. I can discern. I do not need perfect certainty to make a wise decision. I can feel fear without obeying it. I can receive an insight without turning it into another excuse to wait. I can ask for facts when facts are missing, and I can act when enough truth is already in front of me. I am no longer calling confusion my identity. I am no longer treating hesitation as destiny. I meet opportunity with clarity, and I let reality teach me what the next step should be. Chosen one, that is the shift. Not a promise that one exact miracle must happen tomorrow. Not a guarantee that every door you want will open. It is something more durable. When a meaningful opening appears, you can recognize it more clearly because you are no longer training yourself to ignore your own attention. If this is the decision you are carrying forward, write, I am ready to recognize. Let it be a declaration of responsibility, not superstition. You are ready to notice, you are ready to test, you are ready to act with wisdom, and you are ready to stop waiting for perfect certainty before you begin living the part of your life that is already asking for you. The message may arrive quietly. The opportunity may look ordinary. The next step may be smaller than you imagined, but you will meet it differently now. You will not demand thunder before you listen. You will bring attention, discernment, courage, and clarity to the moment in front of you. That is enough for today. Let the noise settle. Let the pressure leave. You do not need to chase tomorrow tonight. When the next meaningful door appears, meet it awake. Meet it clear. Meet it ready to recognize what is truly there.